Another story on the front of the Oz tomorrow, very interesting this one. Broad support for historic trans inquiry. Australia's first ever parliamentary inquiry into gender dysphoria will be put to a vote in South Australia on Wednesday, with several Conservative Labor MPs prepared to back the plan amid a surge in transitioning cases in South Australia. Now, I have no issue with there being an inquiry into trans issues. The problem is that it will probably get warped into a pro-trans thing instead of actually looking critically at the medical treatment that is being offered in this country, particularly to children, such as transitioning.
That's always the risk, but I think there's enough Conservative MPs who are really adamant this must happen, and there's a number of Labor MPs now who are saying this should be a conscience vote rather than a party political thing. So I think there's enough goodwill to make this inquiry happen, and hopefully some good comes out of it, doesn't get twisted.
And you can't do it if they're doing their due diligence. You cannot do it without coming across the tsunami of research, reports, everything else that's happened, not just here in Australia, but in other jurisdictions. The fact that this is now a multi-billion-dollar industry is also something nobody is talking about. The fact that there's clear social contagion going on here, and the downright unethical, I would go so far as to say evil, tactics in which kids are being kind of coerced. This is normalised to them. I'm deliberately confusing you, I would say, of certain people in our education systems, the authority that's being taken off parents right under their noses. All of that needs looking into, as well as the very serious medical repercussions of even something as simple as, oh, well, you're confused a little bit, we'll just pop you on these pills, it's fine. They just pause puberty. No, they don't. They do a hell of a lot more. There's a reason why the Tavistock Clinic in the UK was shut down, and many others are following suit now as it comes more and more to light. And the people pulling the main weight in this argument are people who were transitioned themselves and are now trying to rebuild their lives, going, don't you dare do this to anybody else.
Well, you mentioned the Tavistock Clinic in the UK, and it seems to me Australia's behind the ball when it comes to this argument about whether, gender affirmation as the only treatment for someone confused about their gender is the way to go. And we were going to talk earlier, we didn't get to it, but we should mention the New York Times had an opinion piece. And it's a big thing for the New York Times to have an opinion piece telling the story of young people who had transitioned gender only to later in life regret it and wish that they could have their time back again. And the article talks about the fact that gender dysphoria has been completely politicised to the point where parents, doctors, psychologists are afraid to suggest that perhaps, should examine someone's mental health, examine whether they've been abused, whether it's a sexual orientation thing rather than a gender dysphoria thing. They're too afraid to say anything because to go against the narrative is to make yourself an enemy of the left. And so that was in the New York Times. It's a big thing for the Times to run something like that. So those arguments are happening overseas. They should be happening in Australia. And to this point, they're not. Perhaps this is the start of it. Indeed.
And there is an investigation at the moment into a hospital in Queensland and their gender clinic up there.
Because they got rid of several people who tried to speak out about it.
They sacked doctors who tried to speak out about it. The state government has very quietly introduced this inquiry. It's had very little reporting anywhere in the media, but we have covered it here on Sky. And it needs the coverage. It needs the inquiries, because when you are talking particularly about children being given irreversible treatment, it's dangerous.
And it bears mentioning, last thing on this, and very quick, it bears mentioning that a motion was put up in our federal Senate last year and they all voted it down because a handful of concerned senators were like, hang on a minute, this is going on at a rate of knots in our country. Kids' lives are being ruined. We'd like to look into it and just look at the ethical measures or lack thereof. And they voted it down. That is what this government thinks of your children. It just sickens me when politicians in power... What's wrong with an inquiry? We just wanted to look into it, OK? But if you're convinced that there's not an issue with it, what's wrong with at least having an inquiry?
The fact
what do you
that
have
they
to
were
lose?
completely incurious tells you everything you need to know about that group
Which makes it worse.
Politicians, yeah.